According to reports now circulating in royal circles, there is a folder inside the household administration offices at Windsor Castle that was never supposed to leave the building. Not because it contains state secrets, not because it exposes a scandal, but because of what it represents, and what it quietly set in motion before anyone outside a very small circle understood what was happening. 3 signatures on the front page, 1 authorization code stamped in the upper right corner, and a date handwritten in black ink that nobody thought to question at the time. That folder moves through the system in early 2023. Staff are told it is routine, a standard governance review, the kind of paperwork that gets initialed and filed before lunch, the kind nobody reads twice. Nobody notices the date on it. That is the first mistake. Outside those walls, London is electric. Coronation preparations are consuming the entire city. Street banners are being hung along the procession route. Security cordons are being mapped from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey. Camera positions are being negotiated for the first time in 70 years. The whole world is watching Britain prepare to crown a new king, and everything the public can see tells one clean, simple story. A family united. A monarchy renewed. A moment of national celebration arriving right on schedule. That is the story Camilla's circle believes, too. They are confident. They have spent years building something. Not a formal institution. Not a government department. Something quieter than that, and in many ways more powerful. A web of relationships, a network of trusted voices, a set of informal arrangements that have given certain people inside the royal household an influence that far exceeds their official titles. They have survived the scrutiny that came with Charles's coronation. They have navigated the press. They have outlasted the critics. And now, with the celebrations approaching, they feel settled, protected, permanent. They do not know about the folder. They do not know about the date. And they certainly do not know that the man they have underestimated for the better part of a decade has already finished the work they never saw him start. Now, before we go any further, I need to tell you 3 things this video is going to show you, because this story is not what it looks like from the outside. It is not a family argument. It is not a tabloid conflict dressed up in palace language. What happened inside the British royal household in the months leading up to and immediately following that coronation is a story about something far more fundamental than royal gossip. It is about what happens when people who live close to power begin to confuse closeness with ownership. It is about what happens when a man who has spent his entire life being told to wait, to be patient, to trust the system, finally decides that the system needs him more than he needs it. And it is about one specific legal mechanism, buried inside 17 pages of routine governance language, that rendered every move Camilla's inner circle had spent years building completely, permanently, and legally irreversible. Stay with me. By the end of this video you will understand exactly how William pulled this off, why Charles cannot undo it even if he wanted to, and what that folder with the handwritten date actually means for the future of the monarchy. Hold on to that date. We are coming back to it. Months later, that exact date becomes the moment Camilla's influence begins disappearing. But right now, nobody in her circle has any idea. Let me stop you right there because I know what you think this part of the story is about. You think it is about Camilla personally, about whether she is a good person or a bad person, about the tabloid version of this family that has been running for 30 years, the affair, the divorce, the public grief, all of it. That is not what we are doing here. What we are examining is a system, a very human, very recognizable system that exists not just inside the British monarchy but inside every institution where power concentrates in one place for long enough. You have seen this system operate in corporate boardrooms. You have seen it in political offices. You may have seen it inside your own family. Here is how it works. When someone rises to a position of genuine institutional power, and Charles's coronation represents exactly that, the people closest to them rise with them. Not through elections, not through formal appointments, through proximity, through trust, through years of quiet, loyal access that eventually becomes something that looks, from the inside, almost indistinguishable from authority. Camilla's circle, according to multiple royal commentators who have followed the household closely for years, had developed exactly this kind of network. Advisors who had no formal constitutional role, but whose calls got returned within the hour. social secretaries whose recommendations shaped decisions that never appeared in any official briefing, interior consultants, event planners, communications liaisons, people whose names appear nowhere in the palace organizational chart, but whose fingerprints are on nearly every significant ceremonial decision made in the years between Charles's accession and his coronation. This is not unusual. Every monarch's spouse builds this kind of ecosystem around them. It is how informal influence operates inside institutions that are too large and too slow to run on official channels alone. The problem, according to sources close to the royal household, is what happens when that ecosystem begins to assume it has permanence. When access becomes expectation. When influence becomes entitlement. When the people inside the network stop asking permission and start assuming approval. That shift, royal commentators suggest, is what William was watching. He had been watching it for years. He is not a reactive man. People who know William well, and several have spoken carefully on the record about this, describe a person of profound patience and extraordinary observational precision. He notices things. He files them. He waits. He does not confront. He does not leak. He does not perform frustration for the cameras. He prepares. And while Camilla's advisors were managing seating arrangements and coordinating coronation appearances and building what they believed was an unassailable position inside the household, William had already done something none of them had thought to do. He had read the governance documents. Not the ceremonial ones. Not the press protocols. The actual structural documents. The ones that define how decisions get made, how authority transfers, how administrative oversight works at the operational level of the royal estates and household offices. Most people in his position never read those documents. They have staff for that. They have legal teams and private secretaries and advisors who summarize the important parts. William read them himself. And somewhere inside those documents, inside the dry, institutional language of royal household governance that has not been meaningfully updated in decades, he found something. Something that, in the right hands, at the right moment, with the right preparation, could do something no public statement ever could. It could make the outcome irreversible before anyone understood the game had begun. An advisor inside the household receives unexpected paperwork 3 days later. The paperwork references something called the Sovereign Continuity Protection Clause. Nobody understands its importance. Yet, here is something most people do not know about how the British royal household actually operates. It is not one institution. It is several, running in parallel, governed by overlapping layers of tradition, administrative protocol, and legal instrument. Some of them centuries old, some of them updated quietly through internal review processes that never make the news. The Duchy of Cornwall, the Sovereign Grant Administration, the Lord Chamberlain's Office, the Privy Purse, each one with its own chain of authority, its own documentation, its own quiet history of decisions that shaped what the monarchy looks like today. If you do not follow royal governance closely, and almost nobody does, here is what you need to understand. When a new monarch is crowned, certain administrative authorities that previously resided with the heir apparent's office are subject to a formal review process. Responsibilities shift. Oversight boundaries are redrawn. And in that window of institutional transition, there exists a mechanism that allows the incoming heir, the person who will one day become king, to request a formal governance audit of any household function that intersects with their future responsibilities. That mechanism has a name. According to royal governance experts who have spoken about this, it is known internally as the Sovereign Continuity Protection Clause. It was designed, originally, to prevent administrative chaos during transitions. To ensure that decisions made in the final months before a coronation could be reviewed and, where necessary, restructured to align with the incoming heir's governance framework. It was never designed to be a weapon, but any tool can become one in the right hands. William commissions the governance review quietly, through proper channels, in the months leading up to his father's coronation. The paperwork is filed correctly. The authorization codes are obtained. The signatures are gathered. 3 signatures. 1 authorization code. 1 date in black ink. The folder is filed. The review begins. And inside Camilla's network, the document gets passed around with barely a raised eyebrow. Governance review. Standard procedure. the kind of bureaucratic exercise that generates paperwork and produces nothing of consequence. Boring rules people forget often determine real outcomes. The most consequential decisions in any institution rarely arrive announced. They do not come with press releases or dramatic confrontations. They come wrapped in procedure, dressed in the language of administration, filed under headings nobody thinks to open. A senior royal planner notices, about 6 weeks into the review, that one of her standing recommendations has simply vanished from the forward planning calendar. No explanation attached. No communication from any office. Just gone. She sends an email to check on it. The email goes unanswered for 11 days. She sends a second one. The reply, when it finally comes, references the governance review. It is polite. It is thorough. It says, in careful administrative language, that the recommendation falls within the scope of functions currently under structural assessment and cannot be progressed until the review concludes. She does not yet understand what that means. Neither does anyone else in the network. Meeting requests begin getting delayed. Responses slow down. Approvals that used to come back within 48 hours start taking 2 weeks. Then 3. Something is changing. Nobody can identify the source. And somewhere in Windsor, a man who has not made a single public comment about any of this continues working in silence. One senior planner discovers a recommendation has vanished completely. No explanation attached. There is a particular kind of anxiety that sets in when you realize the system you depend on has stopped responding, and you cannot figure out why. It is different from a confrontation. A confrontation gives you something to push back against. An obstacle you can see is an obstacle you can navigate. But when the system itself changes around you, when the doors that used to open at your approach simply stop opening, without announcement, without explanation, without a face attached to the decision, that is something harder to manage. That is what Camilla's network begins experiencing in the autumn months of the Coronation review period. The shortcuts stop working. Access points that have functioned reliably for years quietly go offline. A direct line to a scheduling office that used to ring through immediately now routes to an assistant who takes messages. A standing invitation to review communications planning documents gets quietly reclassified as requiring sign-off from a new oversight committee. A social secretary who has attended internal briefings for the better part of 4 years is informed, by a polite letter with no return name on the letterhead, that the briefings have been restructured and the guest list is under review. No confrontation, no accusation, no suggestion that anyone has done anything wrong. Just doors, quietly closing. According to 2 royal commentators who have discussed this period at length, the frustration inside the network builds steadily and with nowhere to go. Because there is no one to argue with. No decision to appeal. Every change is procedurally clean, properly documented, traceable back to the governance review that everyone signed off on as routine. You cannot fight a process, especially when the process was designed correctly. Several members of the network begin comparing notes. They discover the pattern is not isolated. Multiple access channels are narrowing simultaneously, across different areas of household administration, with the same procedural justification attached to each one. The governance review. The sovereign continuity protection clause. The boring document nobody read carefully enough. Someone raises it privately with a palace lawyer. The lawyer's response is measured. The process is legitimate, the lawyer explains. The authority is real. The review was properly commissioned and is being properly conducted. By whom, someone asks. By the Prince of Wales's office, the lawyer says. The room goes quiet. A private complaint reaches Charles within the week. It is carefully worded. It does not accuse William of anything improper, because nothing improper has occurred. It simply notes that the pace and scope of the review appear to be creating operational disruption at a sensitive time and requests that the timeline be reconsidered. Charles, according to reports from people close to the household, receives the complaint and asks for answers. He asks his private office to look into it. He asks his legal team to assess the scope of the review. He asks, through the appropriate channels, for a clearer picture of what is happening and why. The answers never arrive. Not because anyone refuses to provide them, but because by the time the questions are being asked through official channels, the answers have already been rendered irrelevant. The process is not pausing for Charles's questions. The process is already moving toward its conclusion, and William has not said a single public word about any of it. Sometimes the most powerful people in the room don't argue. They simply keep moving. This is something William understands in a way that the people around him consistently underestimate. The instinct, when you feel your position threatened, is to respond, to issue a statement, to brief a journalist, to let the other side know you are aware of what they are doing and that you will not tolerate it. William does none of these things. No statements, no leaks, no raised voices in corridors, no intermediaries carrying messages of warning to the other side. Nothing that could be cited, screenshotted, printed, or used. Just silence and work. The restructuring continues during this period with a consistency that royal commentators describe as almost methodical. Each week, another layer of the governance review closes around another function. Each week, the scope of what falls under the Sovereign Continuity Protection Clause expands by one more quiet administrative increment. The public sees nothing. Why would they? The cameras are pointed at coronation rehearsals, at uniform fittings and floral arrangements and crowd control logistics for the procession route. The story the world is watching is one of celebration, continuity, and national pride. Behind that story, a completely different kind of continuity is being established. Now, and I want to be careful here because this is the part where the distinction matters. Nothing that William is doing during this period is improper. Let me be clear about that. The governance review is legitimate. The Sovereign Continuity Protection Clause is a real mechanism applied through the correct process. Every action taken is documented, authorized, and traceable. This is not a coup. This is not a conspiracy. This is a man using the full, legitimate authority available to him in exactly the way that authority was designed to be used. That is what makes it impossible to stop. You cannot challenge a process that has been executed correctly. You cannot appeal a decision that was made through proper channels. You cannot argue that something is wrong when every piece of paperwork says it is right. Camilla's network, by this point, has begun to understand the shape of what is happening. Several senior advisors, comparing the pattern of closures across different areas of household administration, reach a conclusion that nobody in the group wants to say out loud. William planned this, not as a reaction to anything specific, not in response to a particular incident or provocation. He planned it well in advance, prepared the documentation thoroughly, waited for the right institutional moment, the transition period created by the coronation, and then executed it with a precision that left no visible seams. Several advisors believe, even now, that they can still maneuver around it. That some combination of Charles's authority and their own long-standing relationships inside the household will be enough to slow or redirect what is happening. They are wrong. What they do not know, what nobody outside William's immediate team knows yet, is that William has already signed the documents that will end the fight before it reaches any public stage. The signing happens on a Tuesday morning in late April. The documents are 17 pages long. They sit on a desk in the Prince of Wales's private office at Windsor for exactly 4 hours and 11 minutes before they are countersigned by the Lord Chamberlain's office and enter the formal record. After that, nothing can be undone. 48 hours before the coronation of King Charles, London looks like it has been holding its breath for 70 years and is finally ready to exhale. The streets around the procession route are lined 3 and 4 deep with people who have traveled from across the country and across the world to stand in the rain and witness a moment of history. The television crews have been in position for 2 days. Commentators are rehearsing their lines. Children are waving small flags from their fathers' shoulders. Inside the palace, the atmosphere is different. The preparations that the public can see, the uniforms, the carriages, the carefully choreographed procession sequence, are running smoothly. But in the administrative offices, in the household governance suites, in the private corridors where the real operational decisions get made, something has shifted in the past 72 hours that nobody inside Camilla's circle can quite account for. The approval delays have accelerated. Requests that were supposed to clear in 24 hours are now sitting unanswered at 48. Confirmations for ceremonial positions that have been verbally agreed for months have not been formalized in writing. A communications plan that was considered finalized has been flagged, without explanation, for additional review by a committee that nobody in the network can identify by name. The frustration, by this point, has curdled into something closer to panic. Because here is what Camilla's advisors understand about a royal coronation. It is, among many other things, an exercise in positioning. The people who appear in certain spaces, at certain moments, in certain proximity to the central figures, their presence is a statement. It is visible to every camera in the building, to every correspondent filing copy for the following morning's papers, to every foreign dignitary interpreting the signals a new reign is choosing to send. If you are not in the room, you are not part of the story. If you are not part of the story, everything you spent years building to get there was for nothing. This is what makes the sudden cascade of unexplained delays so alarming. An emergency meeting is called the evening before the coronation. Not a formal gathering, nothing that would appear on any official schedule. A private conversation in a private residence, involving several of the network's senior figures, a lawyer, and a communications advisor who has been closely connected to the household for the better part of a decade. The meeting lasts 2 hours and 40 minutes. What emerges from it, according to a source with direct knowledge of the gathering, is not a plan. It is a realization. The oversight authority that everyone in the room had assumed was still in place. The administrative authority that governs which voices have formal input into coronation planning, which positions carry official household recognition, which names appear in the operational documentation, had not been where they thought it was. It had moved. Not recently. Not in response to the panic of the past 72 hours. Months ago. Quietly, completely, and in full compliance with every piece of governance protocol the household operates under. The governance review had not been a review at all. It had been a transfer. And the Sovereign Continuity Protection Clause, the boring document that arrived in an advisor's inbox months earlier and was dismissed as bureaucratic routine, had been the instrument through which the transfer was authorized, documented, and made permanent. Someone at the table asks the question that nobody wants to answer. Can it be reversed? The lawyer in the room takes a long time before responding. If this story is already hitting differently than you expected, good. Because what happens in the next 14 hours is the part that nobody outside that room has talked about publicly until now. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next. Coronation morning. Westminster Abbey. The sky over London is a pale grey that the television cameras will later describe as atmospheric. At 8:14 a.m., a set of documents is countersigned in the Lord Chamberlain's office and formally entered into the Royal Household Administrative Record. Those documents do 3 things simultaneously. First, they confirm the transfer of oversight authority over all coronation planning coordination functions from the household's general administrative pool to the specific jurisdiction of the Prince of Wales's Governance Office. Second, they formally reclassify 7 advisory positions that have been operating under informal household recognition for the past 4 years, positions held by individuals connected to Camilla's network, as non-institutional roles with no standing access to official planning processes. Third, and most significantly, they activate a provision inside the Sovereign Continuity Protection Clause that the network's lawyer had not identified during the emergency meeting the night before. A provision that had been sitting in the governance documentation for months, correctly filed, waiting. The Institutional Continuity Finalization Provision. It states that upon formal countersignature by the Lord Chamberlain's office during a period of active royal transition, all administrative restructurings authorized under the Continuity Protection Framework become permanently embedded in the household governance record and cannot be reviewed, appealed, or reversed through any internal household process. Permanent, not pending review, not subject to future negotiation. Done. At 8:14 a.m. on coronation morning, the doors that had been quietly closing for months close completely. Inside the palace, the morning is moving the way coronation mornings are supposed to move. Household staff are in position. The gold state coach is being prepared in the royal mews. The sovereign's orb and scepter have been moved from the jewel house. The Archbishop of Canterbury is already at the abbey. The machinery of 1,000 years of ceremony is running on schedule. In one of the administrative corridors of the household offices, an official who has been asked to verify the morning's documentation receives the countersigned papers and reads them carefully. He reads them a second time, He picks up his phone and calls a senior figure in the household legal team. The call lasts 6 minutes and 23 seconds. When it ends, the official sits very still for a moment. Then he picks up his phone again and makes a second call, this one to a number inside Camilla's communications office. The person who answers will later describe the conversation as the most difficult call they have ever received in a professional context. Because what the official has to communicate is not that something unexpected has happened. It is something far more unsettling than that. Everything that has happened was expected. It was planned. It was authorized. It was documented correctly at every stage. Every piece of paperwork is authentic. Every signature is legitimate. Every step in the process followed the correct procedural sequence. The documents are authentic, and they are irreversible. The call ends. Outside the window of that corridor, a helicopter from the BBC's aerial team passes low over the palace grounds, its camera capturing the morning preparations for the hundreds of millions of people who will watch the coronation live. They are watching a ceremony begin. They do not know that a different kind of ceremony concluded this morning in a corridor most of them will never see, over documents most of them will never read. At 9:07 a.m., 3 members of Camilla's advisory network arrive at the household administrative offices to request access to a set of planning documents they have worked with for years. The system flags their credentials. Access denied. The screen does not explain why. It does not need to. They already know why. There is a room in the administrative wing of the palace that does not appear on any public tour. Dark wood paneling. A long table with enough chairs for 12. A window that looks out onto a courtyard that is beautiful and completely silent. The kind of room that has absorbed 100 difficult conversations and given nothing back. That room is where it happens. 3 senior figures connected to the household, 2 of them with formal titles, 1 without, request an urgent clarification meeting that same morning. The meeting is granted. William attends. His private secretary is present. A senior member of the Lord Chamberlain's team is also in the room. The conversation that follows lasts 41 minutes. The 3 figures make their case carefully. They are not accusatory. They are not emotional. They present the situation as a procedural concern, an administrative outcome that has created unnecessary operational complexity at a sensitive ceremonial moment, and they request a review of the timeline and, if possible, a temporary restoration of the access arrangements that have been in place for the past 4 years. It is, by all accounts, a measured and professional presentation. It lands on nothing, because the thing they are asking for, a review, a temporary restoration, a reopening of the process, requires something that no longer exists. A mechanism by which any of it can be changed. The institutional continuity finalization provision closed that mechanism at 8:14 that morning. William listens to the full presentation. He does not interrupt. He does not show impatience. Every person in that room will later comment on how still he is throughout. Not the stillness of someone suppressing emotion, but the stillness of someone for whom the outcome of the conversation was never in question. When the presentation concludes, William speaks. He says 7 words. The process is already complete. Then he thanks the people in the room for their time, confirms that any future questions should be directed to his private secretary's office, and stands up. The meeting is over. One of the advisors, according to a person briefed on what happened next, makes one further attempt. A direct question, quietly phrased, about whether this represents a permanent change or a temporary restructuring. William looks at the advisor. He does not answer the question. He does not need to, because the person asking already knows the answer. They have known it since the phone call this morning. They have known it since the emergency meeting the night before, if they are being honest with themselves. They have known it somewhere below the level of conscious acknowledgement, for longer than that. What they are really asking with that final question is not a question at all. It is an appeal. And William, without cruelty, without drama, without a single unnecessary word, declines it. He walks out of the room. His footsteps are quiet on the wooden floor. The 3 figures remain at the table. Nobody speaks. Outside that window, in the silent courtyard, a bird moves through the gray morning air and disappears. The coronation of King Charles III begins in 4 hours and 22 minutes. The monarchy the world is about to watch crowned is not the same monarchy it was yesterday. And most of the people filing into Westminster Abbey in their morning coats and fascinators have absolutely no idea. There is a particular moment in any power struggle when one side understands that it is not losing. It already lost. That moment arrives differently for different people inside Camilla's network. For some it comes during the administrative corridor at 9:07, when the credentials are rejected and the screen shows nothing but red. For others it comes during those 41 minutes in the wood-paneled room, watching William's face and understanding for the first time that his stillness is not restraint. It is completion. For all of them, it arrives with the same fundamental realization. They were not engaged in a battle. They were reacting to the aftermath of one. The battle ended months ago. It ended in a private office at Windsor when a man sat down with 17 pages of governance documentation and identified a mechanism that nobody else had thought to look for. It ended when he commissioned a review through the correct channels, gathered the correct signatures, filed the correct paperwork, and waited with a patience that everyone around him mistook for passivity. They were never fighting William. They were fighting decisions he had already finalized. Every move they made in the preceding weeks, every emergency meeting, every complaint to Charles, every appeal through the legal team, every request for clarification, was a reaction to an outcome that was already locked. They were pushing against a door that had no handle on their side. Preparation often looks invisible until the outcome arrives. And now the outcome has arrived, and the shape of the new reality is becoming clear to everyone inside those walls who has the clarity to see it. The influence network that took years to build, the informal authority, the access channels, the standing relationships with household staff, the procedural shortcuts that turned proximity into something that functioned like power is gone. Not damaged, not reduced, gone. Reclassified, restructured, and formally removed from the operational record of the household in a document that is now part of the permanent governance archive. Camilla still has her title. She still has her role. She is still queen consort. None of that has changed. What has changed is everything around it. The informal machinery that amplified that title, the network of people who translated her proximity to the king into institutional influence over decisions that were never officially hers to make, has been dismantled with the precision of someone who understood exactly how it was built and exactly how to take it apart. Quietly, legally, completely. The panic inside the network spreads in the way these things always do. Not loudly, not publicly, but in the tight, controlled urgency of people who understand that the conversation cannot leave the room. Because there is nothing to announce. There is no scandal. There is no villain in any official sense. There is only a governance review, correctly conducted, that has produced an outcome nobody anticipated. Somewhere in a corridor, a leather folder strikes a polished table. Hard. Nobody picks it up. Coronation Day is here. The Abbey is filling. The cameras are running. The world is watching a monarchy renew itself in the oldest ceremony the country possesses. And the question hangs over every person who knows what happened this morning. When history looks back at this day, will it remember the crown? Or the document signed before anyone arrived? The coronation of King Charles III proceeds without incident. Westminster Abbey looks exactly as it is supposed to look. Ancient stone and candlelight and music that has not changed in centuries. The Archbishop of Canterbury places the St. Edward's crown on Charles's head, and the moment is carried live to 1 billion people who have never set foot in Britain and may never. It is solemn and it is beautiful and it is, in every visible sense, a moment of unity. Camilla sits in her position. She is composed. She is correct. She plays her role with the discipline that everyone who has watched this family for years has come to expect from her. William stands where a Prince of Wales stands. He is still. He watches. He does not celebrate. Not publicly. Not privately as far as anyone can tell. There is no quiet satisfaction visible in his face. No loosening of the composure he has maintained for months. He looks the way he always looks, measured, present, carrying something the cameras cannot quite name. He does not need to celebrate. The work is done. Behind the scenes, the people who understood what happened that morning move through the rest of the day with the careful efficiency of people who have accepted a new reality and are already adjusting to it. There is no confrontation, no humiliation, no public moment of reckoning. Nothing that will appear in tomorrow's papers or be discussed in the post-coronation analysis programs that run until midnight. Just a changed reality. Quiet and permanent and already embedded in the record. Here is what I want you to sit with before you close this video, and I mean this for wherever you are watching from, whether you follow the royal family or not. The loudest people are not always the strongest. Sometimes power wins quietly. Sometimes leadership means preparing so thoroughly, so patiently, so precisely, that by the time the conflict arrives, the outcome is already written. William did not win this because he is cruel or calculating in some cold-blooded way. He won it because he understood something that the people around him consistently failed to take seriously. That proximity is not the same as authority. That access is not the same as ownership. That the silence of a patient person is not permission. It is preparation. There is a question that hangs over the monarchy now, in the months following this day. Was this a single coronation decision, a one-time restructuring made possible by a unique moment of institutional transition? Or was it the first visible sign of how William intends to govern when the crown eventually passes to him? Because if the answer is the second one, if what we witnessed on coronation morning was not an ending but a beginning, then the era of informal influence inside the British royal household is over. Not temporarily, not pending review, done. And the question I want to leave you with today is this, because I think it goes far beyond palace walls. When the opportunity came, William was ready. Were the people around him ready for him to be? Tell me in the comments. Was William protecting the monarchy, or quietly building a different one entirely? If this story reshaped how you think about power and preparation, send it to someone who needs to hear it. Some lessons arrive dressed as royal history, but they belong to everyone.